A few days ago, my husband's family and I were about to leave for a family vacation. Every year, my in-laws have a ritual of taking an annual family vacation where they pick a destination and travel together for a week. My husband, who is 30, and I, also 30, recently got married, though we had been together for 3 years before tying the knot. This would be my first time going on the vacation, and I was excited to finally be included. The year before, while we were engaged, my husband had asked me to join them, but since his family hadn't invited me, I felt uncomfortable and declined. However, this time, my mother-in-law, Sandra, had personally asked me to come along, which I thought was a big step. For a long time, I had felt that Sandra didn't like me. She had never been openly meaning, but she was always distant and cold toward me, unlike how she treated others. I suspected her change in attitude came when my husband moved out of her house to live with me after we started dating. I have always been independent, having lived away from my parents since college, and I wasn't going to change that after getting married. Living with my in-laws, or even close to them, was never an option I entertained, and my husband understood and respected this. Though Sandra never said anything directly, I knew she was unhappy with the fact that her son had left home and believed I was to blame. My husband had been considering moving out for some time, wanting his own space, but the only thing stopping him was his mother's desire for the whole family to live close together. Sandra had made it work for her daughter, who lived just down the street and visited almost every day. Sandra believed this was the ideal way for families to live, and I think she resented me because my husband chose to live further away with me. He grew up with little privacy and appreciated having his own space, so he was happy with our arrangement. Despite Sandra's coldness, I made every effort to get along with his family and integrate into their lives. I thought I had been successful, but it became clear that I hadn't done enough when Sandra revealed that she still didn't consider me part of the family. This conversation took place just before the trip we had been planning for months. Normally, my in-laws cover all expenses for these vacations, as they are well off, and my husband had told me not to worry about money. I had no issue paying for myself, but I was under the impression that, as usual, the expenses would be covered. Sandra asked me to come over to discuss the trip, and I went, assuming it would be about last-minute details. My husband was at work, finishing up before his time off. When I arrived, Sandra sat me down and informed me that, because I wasn't considered family yet, I would need to pay for myself on this vacation. I was shocked and hurt. She explained that while they covered the expenses for family, they didn't feel they had gotten to know me well enough yet. Then, she told me that part of the reason she didn't consider me family was that my husband and I didn't visit as often as the others did. She compared me to her son-in-law, who visited regularly, making it clear that she valued that closeness. Her words stung. I had worked hard to fit into the family and believed I was making progress, especially since she had involved me in planning the trip. If she didn't consider me family, she could have told me that sooner rather than dropping this bombshell right before the vacation. Sandra's words seemed unnecessarily cruel, but I did my best to hide my feelings and appear as though I understood. Inside, though, I was deeply hurt. I didn't want to react impulsively, so I calmly told her that I understood and would pay for myself. Sandra seemed surprised by my response, probably expecting a different reaction, but I didn't stick around long enough to talk further. I quickly headed home, barely holding back my tears. When I got home, my husband immediately noticed that I was upset and asked what had happened. After I explained the conversation with his mother, he was furious. He said he wanted to cancel the vacation immediately, refusing to spend more time with his mother after the way she had treated me. I told him that I had suspected for a while that Sandra didn't like me, but I hadn't voiced it because I thought it was just a silly theory. However, after her remarks, I began to realize there might be truth to it. I explained to him how her behavior toward me changed when he moved in with me and how she used the excuse of not being close enough to justify not considering me family. My husband admitted that family was everything to Sandra, and she had been upset when he first moved out, especially since he didn't choose to live nearby. Although she had hidden it, she probably blamed me and was holding it against me, which explained her cold behavior. Still, it didn't excuse her cruelty and attempt to humiliate me just before the vacation. After our conversation, my husband and I decided that canceling the trip wasn't enough. I wanted Sandra to feel the hurt I had felt. We devised a plan to meet the family at the airport as scheduled but secretly take a flight to a different destination. By the time they realized we were gone, we would already be in another city. The plan was foolproof. The next day, we met Sandra and the family at the airport. Everything seemed normal, and we excused ourselves, saying we wanted to take some photos. While they were distracted, we went to the counter, bought tickets for the earliest available flight to San Francisco, and boarded the plane. I preferred this destination over Miami anyway. It was just my husband and me, without anyone who didn't like me. By the time the family realized something was wrong, we were already seated on our flight. They tried calling and texting, but we ignored all the messages. Thankfully, airports are big, and they couldn't find us before we boarded. Once we landed in San Francisco, my husband sent a message to the family group chat, explaining everything. He told them about what Sandra had said to me and explained that since I wasn't considered family, we had decided to respect that and remove ourselves from the vacation. We expected Sandra and maybe my father-in-law to be angry, but to our surprise, the entire family turned against us. They were furious that we had left them at the airport without a word and claimed they had been worried about us. Even though they still took their flight, they were upset that we hadn't informed them of our change of plans. The family felt that my response to Sandra's words was extreme and unwarranted. They even said I shouldn't have assumed they would cover my expenses for the trip and should have offered to pay from the start. They felt I hadn't made an effort to become part of the family, citing that I never attended their weekly dinners or kept in regular contact through texts. They accused me of treating them like a bank, expecting them to fund my trip without contributing anything in return. I was deeply insulted by their accusations. I earn my own money and would never expect anyone else to pay for me. For them to imply that I was selfish and self-centered was unfair and hurtful. I told them that their expectations were unrealistic. Dinners weren't weekly. They were nearly every other day, and it was unreasonable to expect my husband and me to drive over constantly just to meet their standards. It sounds like you and your husband made a mutual decision to set boundaries with his family, especially in regards to how often you were expected to visit and spend time with them. Their expectation for you both to attend family dinners nearly every other day seems unreasonable, particularly given that you and your husband wanted personal space and had already made efforts to visit once every week or two. You emphasized that you never assumed his family would cover your vacation expenses. If they had communicated earlier that you were expected to pay for yourself, you would have gladly done so or opted out of the trip. However, Sandra's last-minute confrontation, stating that you weren't considered family, seemed like a deliberate attempt to hurt you. It felt premeditated, especially coming so close to the vacation. The accusation that you were isolating your husband from his family also feels unfair. It was a shared decision between you both to create some distance, as your husband also felt that visiting them every day was excessive. It's frustrating that his family refuses to acknowledge this and instead singles you out as the one to blame for the distance. Their reaction after you and your husband decided to take a separate vacation only seems to confirm their unfairness. By sending texts accusing you of trying to break apart the family, they failed to realize that your husband also had his own feelings about the situation. Blocking them seems like a necessary step to protect your peace of mind, especially while you were trying to enjoy your vacation. You've clearly tried hard to fit in with his family and make things work. It's unfortunate that they continue to treat you poorly and place all the blame on you. Despite everything, it seems you've handled the situation with maturity, setting boundaries while still being open about your feelings. It's understandable that you and your husband want to lead a more independent life without being constantly pulled into unnecessary family drama. The fact that your husband supports you through this speaks volumes. It's good that you both are in agreement about how to handle his family's unreasonable demands. Taking space from them for a while might be what's best for your relationship and your personal well-being. It seems like you and your husband are dealing with a lot of intense and difficult family dynamics, particularly with his mother, Sandra. The situation escalated from a disagreement over boundaries into a physical altercation, which is completely unacceptable. It's commendable that you and your husband are standing united and taking steps to protect yourselves, especially by pursuing a restraining order and pressing charges. Sandra's actions, pushing past you into your home, verbally attacking you, and eventually physically assaulting you, crossed serious lines. It's unfortunate that her reaction was so extreme, but pressing charges and seeking legal protection was the right thing to do. She clearly needs to be held accountable for her actions, and setting boundaries is essential for your well-being. It's also unfortunate that her family seems to be enabling her behavior by blaming you for provoking her. That sort of narrative, claiming you intentionally caused her to lash out, is not only unfair but also indicative of deeper issues within the family dynamic. It's great to hear that most people are siding with you and your husband, and that you're not being completely isolated by these false accusations. The fact that you both decided to move and cut off contact with Sandra and her family is a smart step in ensuring your peace of mind and safety. It seems your husband, in particular, has felt suffocated by his family for a long time, and this separation will give both of you the space you need to move forward without their interference. You've navigated an incredibly challenging situation with strength, and setting clear boundaries, both physically and emotionally, is a healthy and necessary response. It's good that you both seem to be on the same page and are actively working towards a future free from the toxicity of Sandra's influence. I hope the new home brings you peace, and that the family drama fades with time, allowing you both to enjoy your life together without any further disruptions from his side of the family. Thank you very much for watching to the story so far. I suggest you to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss tomorrow's stories.